Good morning, everyone. And Geoffrey Klein, thank you for being with me today from Philadelphia.
Thanks very much for having me.
I'm so happy you're here. You are from Nine Dots Media.
That is
What
also
is
true.
what is Nine Dots Media? Tell us all what that's all about.
So we are a visual content company. We focus primarily on graphics, video, and my favorite thing is probably animation. And so, like you, one of the things I know is it's all about the story. So we try and
Mhm.
help companies craft a story that's going to connect with their audience.
And that attracted me to being able to end my week so much with you because my tagline always has, share your story, tell your story. And I love a Friday that ends with someone who is sort of on the same wavelength as me. And selfishly, I say.
Yes, a story people have to stick together.
Yes. But it's so true. I mean, I was getting ready to do a blog for February, and I was sort of struggling with what do I want to talk about, and um, kind of thinking about what do I want to talk about, and I thought about looking at January, and I saw people are still struggling with getting off brand, and I think it's sort of this they keep wanting to reinvent themselves because of the pandemic or fear. And I'm going to write a blog about stay on brand, tell your story. Who are you? And it just always goes back to that, which
Uh,
you and I
yeah,
say all
you're
you probably
definitely
say
you're
all
definitely
the
preaching.
time, but
I believe pretty passionately about the fact that we're all trying to communicate effectively. That's
mhm.
what we're all businesses are trying to connect with their audiences so that their message resonates. And for me, the best way to do that is by telling a story. And what I find is businesses still not only aren't, embracing their story, but they're forgetting to tell it. And instead what they're telling is all these kind of bullet points of benefits and features and things that, while they're important, are not going to be the way that people remember and understand what it is their value is.
Mhm. It's so true because I do a branding exercise, and it's I always say to someone, I don't care if you're Diet Coke, McDonald's, I'm going to do a branding exercise with you because the best brands, if I'm going to tell your story, I need to know how you see yourself, and how you tell your message. But then, even the best of the brands often change. I mean, we're about to have a Super Bowl. We're about to see some of the best messaging. I I'll say yes, I'm going to watch Tom Brady throw that ball down the field again and again. But I am definitely sorry, Eagles fan. I know. I told
Yeah,
you before. I
I
told
have
you
to respect
before
Tom
one of
Brady,
my
but I don't
close
have to like him.
I know. But look, you know what? You would think coming from Michigan, I would be a Lions fan. I'm a Steelers fan, believe it or not. I know. It goes back to growing up with my mother who was from Pittsburgh. So trust me, I'm cringing too. You were hanging in there as an Eagles fan. I know.
The Eagles story is as long as we win one Super Bowl every 60 years, we're happy. That's kind of the story.
Yeah, well, if you're a Lions fan, you're just hoping for once in someone's lifetime. So
Right.
sorry, Lions fans. But we're about to see some of the best messaging, some of the best resonating, and that comes from some of the best brands. And even they'll look at, the story they want to get out there. How tell me about how you work with your clients. What's your process?
You know, we definitely have to get people to understand that the story isn't always about them. And so, I'm an adjunct, and one of the concepts I created for my class was the 11th commandment. The 11th commandment is know thy audience,
Mm,
because it's so much of the time people are talking about themselves. And what I tell clients is, sadly, nobody cares about what you do. They're like, what do you mean nobody? Like, nobody cares about what you do. They only care about what you can do for them. And so when we try and put the context of the story they're going to tell, we have to start with your audience.
Yeah.
Because if you don't start with your audience and you don't understand your audience, then the story you're going to tell isn't going to resonate. And then it'll just be a waste, hot air.
And do
So a
they
lot of
often
times that's where we start.
and do they often understand that their audience can be different
Oh, definitely. And I think, again, it's about,
or changing?
I'm working on an article now about the difference between convincing and educating. And so a lot of times, it's where one of the challenges for companies is they want to be, everything to everybody.
Oh,
And that spreads you so thin. And the beautiful thing about, digital marketing now is the ability to target. But in order to target, you need to understand who your audience is, who's your ideal client. And so the concept I'm working on is that if I have to convince someone about the power of animation or visual content, they're probably not that's a lot of effort to kind of push that, rock up the hill, and it's not gonna. Whereas what I'm really looking for is people who are open to it, who are like, that's intriguing, and let me know more. And then you have the ability and the opportunity to educate them. And so I think when companies recognize, if you're trying to convince someone who's not really in your audience segment, you're never going to convince someone who doesn't believe in something to all of a sudden, oh yes, I need your product or service. And so it's about understanding the audience to the point that, like, okay, I'm not necessarily going to go after audiences that aren't going to resonate with what I have. And the way we kind of reverse engineer that is to figure out what is the problem. So we created a tool called the Story Pad, and it's an acronym, PAD, because as Aristotle, determined way back in 350 BC, every good story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So we try and structure. I like to keep things simple. Life's too complicated for me to try. So the PAD, PAD, stands for the beginning, middle, and end of your story. And so for the business stories, the P represents the pain or the problem of your audience. So you have to know your audience in order to figure out what their pain is. And you start there because when you hear that, ad, and you're like, oh wait, that's me, because they're identifying what matters to you, what your pain point is. Okay. And then the A is about the answer. So what is your product or service that's going to resolve their pain? And a lot of companies will stop there and kind of like, okay, here's the problem, we have the answer. But I've been recently kind of pushing the fact that the D, the end of the story, is really important. And the D stands for the difference or the impact that it makes in their life or in their business. So they have this problem that you can help solve, and then you have to paint the picture, express the story about what that impact will be once they do it. And I'll give you a silly example. So, there are going to be a lot of P&G kind of, household commercials, oh my God, I have dirty clothes. I've got a stain. And it's like, okay, that's your problem. Like, oh, I can't have my child wear this. Don't worry, Tide or to pick out anyone. We have this wonderful thing. And so when you use it, not only is the implication you'll have clean clothes, but it's the story behind that, which is you'll have a happy child. And so you see in those commercials, the kid has the fresh favorite shirt on, is super happy, and the mom's smiling or the dad's smiling. That's the impact. That's the D, the difference that it makes. And so we work on what's the pain of your customers, and how do you help them solve it, and what difference does it make in their life? And that's kind of an easy structure to keep within the narrative frame that we find really effective.
And are you creating so people really understand what you physically do? You're physically handing in the digital platform commercials, videos. What's the product that you're giving? Just so people,
Sure.
understand.
So the deliverable, as it were, it could
Yes.
be for commercial, or it could be for social media, or for their website, depending on what the distribution is of the product. But our product, as a product slash service, is a video, an animation, an infographic. It's that tangible, not tangible, but that piece of content. So we're creating content that someone can then share, and they can do it, through advertising or on their other social media platforms. But it's about being email marketing. It's about having a story, piece of content that you can share with people, and it helps them understand what your value prop is and how you can help them.
Is there an I get asked this all the time in my world, who do you work with? Who's your ideal client? And I have a standard answer, and it's really anybody who everybody has a story to tell, and I help them tell their story. And I believe that because um I, it can be, and it really can be anybody. I believe that you know people think, well, I have a pen, I sell a pen. I'm like, that's your story then, and somebody wants the pen. And so I laugh asking you this, but it's really for people who are listening. Do you have an ideal client?
I do. What I usually tell people is that I'm industry agnostic. So we can help people in different industries we work with, financial, professional services, consumer brands. That
Mm,
part is less important. What I find is it has to be someone who may be struggling to connect with their audience. So it's my audience's problem is that they have this message that they're trying to get out, but they're having difficulty. One of the kind of places I think is like if you're an organization or a business and someone says, "What do you do?" and you struggle to explain that,
mhm,
they're a perfect client for us. And that's why you'll see things called explainer videos, because what it does is it often takes things that are complicated in nature, and by creating a piece of content, you're forced to simplify it and make it digestible for someone. So we'll take something, we have a client we're working with that's a lock company for vehicle accessories. And so they have rooftop box and camper things. And it's like for them to go through the technical part of what they do, not very exciting. But what we've done is we've created little stories, little vignettes of their customers and how this little product can help their life be better and easier and all those things. And so it's about taking something that might be technical or complicated and I'm about keeping things simple. I believe
yeah,
that pretty
no,
strongly.
well,
Um,
and you say that you're about keeping things simple. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I think that we have created a world of people have no attention span, and I mean, we have. I mean, we've just, as we create more technology for them to use, their attention span has gotten shorter and shorter, I mean, we used to say you tell someone something three times, and I don't mean our children. And now we have to tell people things over and over because they're not listening. They're not paying attention the three times anymore. We have to, you know,
I often share. I believe that I say we're suffering from two pandemics, other pandemics.
yeah, many.
One of them is short attention spans, which the studies show that they did a study about 2000 where the average human attention span was 14 seconds,
Mhm.
and today the average attention span of a goldfish is 9 seconds, and the average human attention span is 8 seconds. So that our attention span has actually dwindled to that less than a goldfish. So yeah, but then we have the second problem, which is what I call infobesity, information overload.
Yeah.
Not only are our attention spans, but there's so much information, more that's every day it gets worse and worse and
Yeah.
worse. And so how do you combat these two problems? And my answer is by telling the story, because it connects with people
Yeah.
from a brain chemistry perspective and an emotional connection. And so it's it's an answer to the problem that a lot of people are having. And so telling people more and more data points is not going to be what they remember. And that's what I mean. There's science and data behind. When you tell a story, it's more likely people will understand what you do and
Mhm.
remember what you do. And that's
I
golden.
love that we're having this conversation on a sunny Friday here in Michigan because it's one of those things where I'm like, yes, you so understand what I tell people. I'm like, if we could just take this conversation and keep playing it over, or maybe I'll just use it when I'm talking to my clients and they're like, they're sort of like, well, I don't know. I'm like, no, listen to Geoffrey and I. Listen to this conversation. We sort of know what we're talking about. We've
And it's not you listen.
been doing this a while.
I rely not just on myself and my own experience and with clients, but again, if you look at all the studies in terms of what resonates with people, and the one particular study I often reference is neuroscience. So it's like,
Mhm.
you're talking about brain science behind this,
Mhm.
where there's a professor who was at the time at Princeton, Ori Hassan, who did a study about this, and he compared audiences who were given information, all those things. What I often joke is death by PowerPoint, uh, and he compared how their brains, what activated in their brain versus people who heard a story. And the people whose brains got all the information, two parts of their brains activated, the vernix area and the Broca's, which you need to understand the meaning. But when people were told a story, their brains lit up. And so it's physiology, it's biology, and so it's not just us. Don't believe what I say. Go look at the
Right.
science.
Well, and I say that all the time, and I often will say, and I'll get the advertising world mad at me, but and if someone says, should I place an ad? I'll say an ad or an avatorial, because an avatorial tells us it's the same thing. An avatorial will tell a story. If you really feel you need to place an ad, I say avatorial. Anytime you can tell your story, anytime you can show your story, anytime you can be in a media place to show your story, um, tug at a heartstring, visually, you're going to have that moment, whether it's 10 seconds, 30 seconds, or a longer format. You're going to have that moment where you're going to resonate with someone, and that's where you get to convey. Again, I don't care if you're selling a toothpick or selling a cancer research. That's when it's going to resonate, which is why visually I love what you do, um, and you get it. So
I
been
try,
doing.
and for me, it's there's kind of a path, which is, we want to communicate with people, and the best way to do this is by telling stories. And then I take that next step, which is, and I love the written word, don't get me wrong, but what the study shows that the best way to tell that story is visually.
Mhm.
So for me, that's why I do what I do, because I think it's the most powerful way to connect with people,
Yeah.
is when you have that visual. Because we're all, I think 60% of us are visual learners.
Mhm.
And going back to the brain, I love the stat. It's that the brain processes visual content 60,000 times faster than text.
Yeah.
But that being said, when we do animation, what's the first thing we start with? The script, because the story, the essence of the story is what matters, and then we bring it to life. And so it's that combination of story and of ideas and visual that really, I think, is the 1-2 punch
Well,
to that.
it's always that combination. How do people get to work with you? Where do they find you?
The easiest way to work with us is to get in touch with us through our website. It's 9dotsmedia.com, or my name, Geoffrey with a G, at 9dotsmedia.com. We're 9dots media on most social platforms, but if you go to 9dotsmedia.com, then you can click all the social media content, and then just reach out. So
Great. Well,
I'm happy
I've
to
put
help.
it on this link on this Facebook Live today. It's such a pleasure.
Fantastic.
I hope for sure if I'm in Philly, we get to connect in person one day. But I definitely want to have you back soon so we can keep this conversation going. It's really been a pleasure.
That would be
Um,
awesome. Thank you
yeah,
so
I
much.
really enjoyed this conversation, and who knows, we run in the same kind of life, and love to work together. So
That would be fabulous. Thanks so much, Sarah.
all
Take care.
right, have a great day. And I already connected with you on LinkedIn, so we'll stay in touch.
Let's connect.
All
Awesome.
right, take care. Bye bye.
Thanks a lot.